Chapter 6 A New Navajo Family. One morning at breakfast the driver said, "We're getting close. In only a few hours we'll be at Fort Davis." Danny couldn't understand, but he knew the driver wanted to tell him something. He pointed down the road. Danny followed his gaze and saw nothing. Over and over the driver pointed down the road. "Fort Davis!" he shouted. He stood up and waited until Danny returned his look. "Fort Davis," he said again, more quietly. "Fort Davis," Danny repeated, pointing in the direction they were going. The driver smiled and slapped Danny's shoulder in a friendly way. "That's right, son, Fort Davis. You're learning to talk." Danny looked to the ground. A fear crept over him. Soldiers lived at Fort Davis. Soldiers had burned his home and killed his sheep. Soldiers did not like Navajos. The driver patted Danny on the shoulder. When Danny looked up, he pointed to himself and spoke. "Rick," he said. "My name is Rick." "Ricka," Danny said. "Rick." He pointed to the driver and repeated his name. "Rick." Rick said yes, then he waited. He pointed to Danny and shrugged his shoulders. "Danny Blackgoat," Danny replied. No white man had ever asked him his name. Rick grabbed Danny's shoulder and smiled. "I am Rick, and you are Danny Blackgoat," he said. "They told me to call you Fire Eye, but I knew that wasn't your name. You are Danny Blackgoat. I like that." An hour later the wagon stopped shaking. Danny knew they were nearing the fort, where the road would be more traveled. He looked out the rear of the wagon. Purple mountains surrounded the fort, mountains topped with shiny white snow. As they pulled through the gates of the fort, Danny closed the cloth curtains and scooted to a dark corner. He didn't want to see the soldiers in their mean blue uniforms. The wagon came to a halt. "Hello," Rick shouted. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," said a woman. She must be Rick's wife, thought Danny. He didn't understand what they said, but he heard the warmth in their voices. He crept to the curtains and opened them just enough to see Rick and his wife. She was Navajo. That's why he was nice to me, Danny thought. He's married to a Navajo woman. He likes Navajos. Danny closed the curtains and pulled his knees to his chest. He felt confused. Why would a Navajo woman marry a Balagana, a white man? He asked himself. The biggest surprise was yet to come. Danny peeked through the curtains again. A young woman appeared beside her mother. She seemed shy even with her parents. She looked to the ground and waited while her mother and father embraced. When they kissed, she turned her head away. Danny smiled. She is so shy, he thought. She looks more like her mother, too, more Navajo. Her shiny black hair and how she bats her eyes, those sweet brown eyes. They are like my sister's, only softer. "Danny," Rick shouted, "there's somebody I want you to meet." Danny pulled the curtain shut and crawled to the back of the wagon. "I hope they didn't see me watching." "Come on out, Danny," Rick said. "I saw you watching us." Lucky for Danny, he didn't understand a word Rick said, but he still felt caught. Rick opened the curtains and motioned for Danny to climb down. "Come on, Danny." "I don't want to meet that girl," Danny lied to himself. He scrambled from the wagon and his heart fell. A sadness swept over him. Rick and his wife stood before him, but the girl was gone. "This is Danny Blackgoat from Canyon de Chelly," Rick said. "The soldiers call him Fire Eye, but his name is Danny Blackgoat." "Yaate, greetings," Rick's wife said. "My name is Susan. My mother's clan is Bead People. My father's is Bitter Water. My grandmother's is Minnie Hogan's, and my grandfather's is Near the Mountain." Rick stood watching and listening as Danny Blackgoat and Susan greeted each other in the proper Navajo way. "My mother's clan is Towering House, and my father's is Sagebrush Hill," Danny said in a quiet and respectful voice. "My grandmother's is Many Goats, and my grandfather's is Deer Spring." "I am glad to meet you," Susan said. Danny nodded. "And this is our daughter Jane," Rick said, pointing to the doorway of a building. Jane took 2 small steps from the shadows. She never lifted her eyes to look at Danny. "Yaate, greetings," she said, then vanished behind her mother's skirt. "All right, Danny," said Rick, back in the wagon. He opened the curtains, and Danny climbed inside. Rick laughed and turned to his wife. "It didn't take those two long to fall in love," he said. She slapped him on the shoulder, but she was laughing too. I wonder where they lived, Danny thought, but he never had a chance to ask. Rick and his Navajo wife disappeared inside the building. Soon a soldier flung back the curtains. He was stout and strong, with a dark mustache above his lip and a mean look on his face. "Get down here, Fire Eye," he shouted. Danny climbed from the wagon and hung his head. The soldier saw the chains on his feet. "Good," he said. "I won't have to worry about you running anywhere." He grabbed Danny's long black hair and pulled hard. Danny fell to the ground. He felt every muscle in his body tense up. He flexed his biceps and clenched his fists. "Don't do it," he told himself. "Now is not the time. Let him think he has won. Then you will have a chance." "I give you a week and we'll be dragging your body to the desert," the soldier said. He started to walk away, then turned and kicked Danny in the stomach. "Here," he shouted to a group of soldiers. "Give me a hand with this one. Carry him over to the prison barracks. Chain him to a bed. If he gets away, you'll be chained yourself, so do it right." Danny spent his first night in a white man's bed, surrounded by 50 other prisoners. They were from the Confederate Army, fighting against the United States in the Civil War. But Danny didn't care about white men fighting other white men. He wanted to be home. While the other prisoners slept, Danny stared through the window at the bright yellow moon, wishing he were home at Canyon de Chelly.